In this video, we'll be replacing a few parts on the KitchenAid Stand Mixer model KSM150PSWW0. Start by removing the rear access cover, and then remove the trim band. The speed control plate is connected to 3 components on the mixer: the power cord, the phase control board, and the mixer. You can now remove the rear gasket. Carefully use a pin punch tool to remove the groove pin from the Planetary. Pull down on the Planetary to separate it from the center shaft. Use a pin punch tool to knock out the hinge pin and separate the top from the base. Remove the following screws to separate the upper halves and access the gearbox. Tap the casing gently with a rubber hammer, and you may need to use a screwdriver to help separate the upper and lower halves. Reserve the excess gearcase grease in the upper portion of the gearcase box. Replacing the transmission gearcase gasket is recommended. Push up on the center shaft and remove the dowel pin. Push down on the center shaft and remove the center gear. Be aware there is a spacer on the bottom of the center gear that will need to be reattached. Coat the new center gear with grease and reattach the spacer. Install the new center gear and align it with the center shaft. Insert the dowel pin into the center shaft. Align the dowel pin with the center gear and push down on the center shaft to lock it in. We will now replace the mixer attachment hub gear. Coat the new hub gear in grease before installing. Replace the transmission gasket and grease if necessary. Push down on the center shaft to ensure the dowel pin doesn't fall out and align the 2 halves. Reinsert all screws and tighten them down. Reattach the Planetary and work it into place until it's flush with the casing. Realign the center shaft with the Planetary and insert the groove pin. Reattach the trim ring Align the top with the base and reinsert the hinge pin. Next, we will unhook the speed control plate spring from the speed control plate. You will need to have a cloth or a zip tie, like in the example in the video, to hook the spring into once it's detached. The speed control plate adjustment screws are part of the speed control plate. Before loosening these screws, measure the distance from the lock nut to the back of the plate. Loosen the speed plate adjustment screws from the back of the mixer. Each terminal on the new speed plate is marked with the wire color indicator. Before installing the new speed plate, ensure the bottom speed plate screw is screwed into the same depth as the original. Mount the speed control plate to the rear of the mixer. Reattach the speed control plate spring. Reinstall the rear gasket. Carefully reattach all wires to their designated terminals. Adjust both of the speed plate adjustment screws to the original depth. If you cannot read it from a tape measure, measure an object of the same depth and use it as a spacer to ensure both screws are even. Reattach the trim band. When reattaching the rear cover, ensure the rear gasket fits inside the groove on the inside of the cover. The speed control plate has two sets of adjustment screws. To adjust the low speed, adjust the two top screws evenly, and to adjust the high speed, you would adjust the bottom screw. Replacing the motor brushes on your stand mixer should be a simple repair. Carefully unscrew the motor brush cap and remove the motor brush. Note the orientation of the motor brush when you remove it, as both sides are different. The motor brush on the speed side will have the flat corner facing the rear top of the mixer. The motor brush on the lock side will have the flat corner facing the rear bottom of the mixer.